right, 420 as we do every Tuesday throughout the football season, really every week, football in the 20s. We welcome in our good friend, our NFL and Eagles insider, Johnny Mac. John McMullen, kind enough to join us on a Tuesday edition of BYP. Johnny Mac, how are you?
Good. How are you? Did you enjoy Super Wild Card Weekend?
I did. We did very well with the picks. Well, I mean, listen, let's be honest. I was at the barbecue cooking for a lot of people with the Giants, but yeah, did I enjoy the Eagles getting thumped? Sure. Did I enjoy the Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy with his horrible play calling and not knowing what's going on late? The Dallas Cowboys choking it away? Yeah, I did. So to answer your question in short, I did enjoy the games. Now, I thought the Eagles were going to cover. They got outclassed. They got outcoached. Hurts didn't play particularly well, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Let's just start with the game itself. What stood out in your mind the most during that Eagles loss to Tampa Bay?
Just how poor the offensive game plan was. I don't think they – and you know, I talked about Nick Sirianni about this leading up to the game. You know, you have to adjust to who you're playing. And typically when you're an offensive head coach, you're worried about, in this case, Todd Bowles and the defensive side of the ball. But it's more than that because you're playing Tom Brady and you're playing the Tampa Bay offense, and it's complementary football. Everything kind of meshes together. So we know how the Eagles are built. We know how they win games when they win games. They're a run-first team. There's a small margin of error. I've talked about this with you for weeks and weeks and weeks. That's why teams don't like to play that way.
Yeah.
And if you're playing an explosive offense, you better know damn well you better take the lead early. And if you get down 17-0, essentially the game is over.
Yeah.
And I didn't see any adjustments. And it started with the coin flip. You don't defer against a team that's that explosive. Take the football. Try to take the lead.
Yep.
Maybe it doesn't work.
Yep.
But, if you want to play from the lead, what's the easiest way to do that?
You got to have the ball.
Take the football.
Yeah, listen, I thought when Tampa Bay went right down the field, right methodical, they put up 7, then all of a sudden a quick 3 and out, I said, all right, here you go. But the defense stood for the next drive or so. But then they go up 14-0. They kicked the field goal. They could have easily made it 21. You had the pick by Jalen Hurts, which, listen, he had a couple bad plays in that game, and he missed a couple wide receivers. I thought at 17-0, did you get the sense that they pretty much had to abandon the ground game?
Oh, yeah. At that point, it's over. And if you would have told me before the game, well, Jalen Hurts is going to throw more passes than Tom Brady, I would have said, okay, stop right there. The Eagles got destroyed.
Absolutely.
That's what happened, and that's what is going to happen in that kind of circumstance. And that's why, I asked Nick after the game about that. When did you start pressing? And he said it wasn't 17-0. It was really 24-0 after the Jalen Reagor muff. And by the way, that guy's a disaster. But it should have been before that because at 17-0, the game's over. At 14-0, the game's over. I thought the defense actually, I can't even get to the defense because the Tampa Bay scored on 3 of their first 4 possessions.
Correct.
And it was really that last, when they held them to a field goal, it was 3 consecutive plays. It was Singleton did a nice job in coverage. He undercut Gronk, and then Ryan Kerrigan had a tackle for loss. Then they had a sack.
Yep. 3
consecutive plays to stop that drive, hold them to a field goal. Then after that, they held Tampa Bay down for a while until the Reagor muff, and that's really when it got out of hand. But the offense didn't do its part, and that was from the start. You're going to have to score some points to beat Tampa Bay, and they weren't able to score some points to beat Tampa Bay, to say the least.
When you look at the game by Jalen Hurts, and I also thought, and Didinger brought up a great point in post-game, so did Seth Joyner, because he mentioned it after they lost to Dallas, even though they had the backups. You don't want to limp into the playoffs. You limp out. Ray Dininger said, look, I don't get it with this head coach. When he's adamant and he gets tunnel vision, right? Let's force feed the ball to Goddard, not working. Let's try to run, not working. Now let's try to force feed the ball to Smith. When you look at Jalen Hurts and you look at that performance, we know there's enough blame to go around. I guess it didn't help his case if people were already on the fence with Jalen Hurts being the starter going into next season. I guess we both believe he will be the starter. I know Nick Sirianni basically endorsed him. I mean, what's he going to say? We'll see.
That doesn't mean.
No doubt.
I've been pretty consistent. I don't think this decision is that hard for the Eagles. Everybody's made it out to be hard for the Eagles. It's not hard. They'll try to get better. If they can, they will. If they can't, they're okay with Jalen Hurts to be the starter. There's no law that says a bridge quarterback is only for a year. So you have this goofy narrative of Jalen Hurts has a year to prove he can be the starting quarterback for the Eagles. Now he had a year to prove he wasn't a disaster. Now, if he was a disaster, then, yeah, he's obviously done. But he played well enough. He got the team in the playoffs. He beat bad teams. He didn't beat good teams. And he proved he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, probably a lower half starting quarterback. Not probably. That's where he is. And if they can get Russell Wilson, if they can get Deshaun Watson or somebody of that nature, which is very, very unlikely, they will do it. If they can't, I don't think they like any of the picks, any of the potential quarterbacks that will be first-rounders. I don't think they look at them and say that's a significant upgrade over Jalen Hurts, so they'll push back another year. They might trade one of those first-round picks to get another first-round pick in next year's draft. And you just roll it over and roll it over until you can find a quarterback that's better than the quarterback you have. I really don't think it's that difficult for them.
Well, I guess it's because I guess it's almost like it divided, even with some of the media, right? They're stating the case for the pros and the cons, and there's a lot of, well, you're not going to give up assets and draft picks because you're not ready to win now. But I mean, come on, man. If a Wilson or a Watson or a Rodgers come across, that's utterly ridiculous. For a fact they'll elevate you to that next step. So I get your point. I somewhat get their point. I'm curious, though, to get your insight on the offseason. When you look at this team and you've got some areas of weakness, what should be the first area that this team needs to address, either in free agency or the draft?
Conventionally, it is quarterback. It remains quarterback. And you mentioned the three names. Look, I scratched Rodgers off because he's not coming here. If he does leave Green Bay, he's going to go to the West Coast somewhere, maybe Denver, but he's not coming here. So if you can convince Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, and obviously the latter has to clean up his legal issues as well. So we've been all through that. If you can get one of those three players, you do it. And this is the time to do it for the reason you have the assets to do it. That's why you do it, because you have the assets to get a superstar quarterback. So if they can pull that off, I guarantee you one thing about Howard Roseman. He's going to get the superstar quarterback if that path is available to him. Other than that, which I don't think will be available, you start looking at the defensive side of the ball first and foremost. They need an edge rusher. They need arguably two safeties. They need another corner, and they need a big play linebacker. And people are asking, why is Jonathan Gannon getting head coaching interviews? And they say, what think about what I just said.
Yep.
They need an edge rusher.
Yep.
They need another corner. Yep. They need two safeties. They need linebackers. That's why. That's why he's getting head coaching interviews. And he's got a top 10 ranked defense with all those personnel deficiencies. And then it's embarrassing to say this because they've used premium picks on the position for 3 consecutive years, but they still need another receiver,
wide receiver,
which is just an indictment of obviously Jalen Reagor and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. But also, remember, Nick Sirianni's position is wide receiver. That's what he grew up as a player, as a coach. That's his position. And while he wasn't brought in to fix the wide receiver position, head coaching job is obviously a far bigger job than that. He spent a ton of time with those guys in training camp to the point I was saying, what are you doing, dude? You got to coach the whole team. And guess what? They got worse.
I know.
I wouldn't be adverse to blowing up that whole room, setting Devontae Smith aside, turning the whole room over besides Smith.
You need a veteran wide receiver, too. You need a veteran presence.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's a Robinson or a Ridley. Let me give you a couple names, and you tell me when you look at, we'll start with unrestricted free agents, if you think they'll be back. Rodney McLeod, Derek Barnett.
No and no.
Anthony Harris.
In the case of, Rodney's too old.
Yep.
I think Anthony 31. Might be back because you need one of the two safeties.
Yep.
And if I'm going to pick one, Anthony's a little bit younger. He has the bigger history with Jonathan Gannon because they dated back to their time together in Minnesota. So I just for that reason, and he won't be that expensive. And I think they need to keep one of them. Plus, he has less of an injury history. So I think he'd be the more logical one. Barnett's the one Eagles free agent that even though everybody thinks he's terrible, he's not. And he'll get a decent contract, and the Eagles aren't going to go down that road.
Kerrigan was a disaster, finally makes a play.
Not the playoffs. He was slow playing.
He was
great.
He was great. During the regular season, he looked completely cooked.
Oh, he was awful. Who's this guy showing up in the playoffs? He slow played us. He put us all to sleep, and then he shows up against Tom Brady.
Rope-a-dope.
If you would have told me the Eagles got 4 sacks on Tom Brady, I would have called you nuts.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. You had to get him off the spot.
Yeah, and they did a good job defensively for most of the game, comparatively speaking. I like I said, I can't even get to the defense because of just how pitiful the offense was.
I know we'll have a ton of time to get into the offseason. I want to get to some of these games. And, I was talking about some of these young quarterbacks, right, where you have to have a little bit of patience here and there. And we saw what happened last night with Murray. We'll get into that. But the Pats going on the road, getting absolutely waxed by Buffalo. I mean, look, you show up a year, you arrive a year early. Great story, the hoodie and Mac Jones. Buffalo seems like they're on a mission. I love this matchup against Kansas City. We knew they were going to wax the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. So if you kind of look ahead to that matchup, Bills and Kansas City, what's your early thoughts on that one?
Yeah, this is the best weekend of football if you're a football fan because some of those first-round games and those 7 seeds obviously didn't belong in the playoffs. And this you'll have good teams against good teams. Look, I like the way Buffalo is playing, but it's tough to go against Kansas City. It really is. I mean, you talk about the Bills' explosiveness. Well, look at Mahomes in that game.
Crazy.
And they're clicking on all cylinders. And I think everybody in the AFC was scared of that when Kansas City was struggling earlier in the season. If they could get it together, and guess what? They've gotten it together. And the defense is an issue, but they've been playing well enough to where, if they score 30, 40 points, it's going to be tough. So I like Buffalo, but I just think Kansas City's the best team in the AFC.
I agree. We talked about it when they were, 4-5. We both said they're about to make a run, and they have. Let's stick with the AFC. Cincinnati over the Raiders. How about the Raiders, right? I mean, the Raiders got a good interim head coach, but yet they're going to try to hire a head coach. Mayock's sitting there, which, by the way, if this guy, when he's, quote-unquote, out, how do you think this guy's ever going to get a job on TV again? How do I take what he's saying as credible? This guy stunk as a GM.
Well, I think he'll get a job pretty quickly on TV. But that's, it gives you an indication. I mean, Mike's really good. Mike's really good with the draft. He was when he was working for the NFL Network. But it's a different job. I constantly talk about this with Eagles fans that it's not just personnel being a general manager in the NFL. It's such a bigger job than that. And it's like nobody understands it. And they talk about your first-round pick in 2017, and that's all you do. You got to hire a staff. You got to hire scouts. You got to run the ship as far as the roster and the salary cap and all this and trades and picking up people on way. You got to build a whole department of people. And the assumption that some guy is sitting there picking this player and picking this player and there's no scouts and there's no I just don't get it. I just don't get people's thought process and their lack of understanding of what it takes to be a general manager in this league. But clearly, Mike's a personnel guy and he wasn't successful. And part of the reason he wasn't successful is because he didn't build the department properly. And if you sit and read your draft guide, guess what? You're not going to be successful as an NFL general manager. It's as simple as that.
You like Cincinnati as a live dog against Tennessee? Yeah,
mainly because I think Tennessee's the worst number one seed I've ever seen. And it's just they're not a bad football team, but typically when you think of number one seeds, you think about, well, look at the other side. You think about Green Bay. And you think about their dominance. Yep. And how are you going to beat Green Bay and Lambeau?
Yep.
And by the way, San Francisco should have a shot because they can run the football.
Exactly.
But they look like a number one seed, Green Bay. Tennessee does not look like a number one seed to me.
Yeah, and look, they limped in without Henry. You get them back. You still got Tannehill. You got some weapons. You got to run the football. You got to keep Burrow in check. You got to cause some turnovers.
Yeah, but I don't want to hear about a number one seed having to run the football. You know what I mean?
But you don't want to hear it, but that's the reality.
He should be able to beat you a million ways as a number one seed.
But really, though?
Not like you got to be the Philadelphia Eagles.
Well,
beat one way.
I don't. I know what you're saying.
And that by the way, they're better than that. I'm being
I know what
facetious.
you're saying. I know
they're
you're being facetious. I know. You're being feisty, John, which we love. And maybe it's because, the public perception or recency bias we saw what Cincinnati did. I think Cincinnati has a legit shot, 3.5-point favorite to not only cover but win the game outright because, you've got that offense that's clicking on all cylinders. I don't see if Cincinnati goes up 17-0, the Titans are coming back.
Well, that's the same thing we were talking about. Yeah, you got a guy who's chucking the football for 525 yards, and if you're hot on a particular day and you have that explosiveness on the offensive side of the football, that's what the modern NFL is.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can't win in these other ways, but I said it in this conversation. I say it all the time. The margin of error is smaller.
Yep.
And you don't expect that out of a number one seed. You expect a number one seed to be able to beat you any way they need to beat you. And I don't get that feeling from Tennessee.
How about the Raiders? I'm sorry, the Raiders. How about the 49ers? I had them going into Dallas, winning that game. Moneyline hit outright. Listen, Jimmy's always good. Death taxes and Jimmy G with the pick late. But if you watch that game and go back and watch it, I'm wondering from a guy like you that's covered the NFL for as long as you've had, it's almost like just poetic, right? You almost knew watching it Dallas was going to find, whether it was Romo against Seattle or Romo against the Giants or the Dez no catch. You just had this feeling they were going to choke it away, right? I mean, I didn't think Dallas was winning that game. They didn't deserve to win the game, but my God, the fashion in which they self-destructed and self-defeated late, that's. I'm not shocked by it. Are you?
Yes and no. I mean, they're a tremendously talented team. If you look at both sides of football, typically if you have talent, you're able to win. Look, they have a recent history, obviously, of failing in big spots, but I don't know how much all that has to do with the guys playing now other than, look, you played a poor game. You had 14 penalties. You had you got to come back. If Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't let you back in the game, you probably don't even have that opportunity. But I know, people don't like Mike McCarthy. People don't think it's a dumb play call. They probably should have needed about 18 seconds or so to run that play. But also, if your quarterback doesn't know you have to give the ball to the umpire to spot it, you're in trouble. So it's like, who's responsible for that? I'm sure the coaching staff has told Dak Prescott, hey, guess what? You've been playing this game for a long time now. You should know the umpire
Agreed.
has to handle the football. So I got to blame that on the quarterback in a big spot, in a big situation, who just kind of lost it in a big spot because he's played enough football to know the mechanics of that. Maybe fans don't know the mechanics of that, but a quarterback knows the mechanics of that. So I got to blame that on Dak Prescott. But why? The bigger problem to me is why were the Cowboys in that situation? And by the way, if they get the playoff, they still got to throw the ball in the end zone. It's a long shot, so people assuming they're going to win the game are probably nuts. They're probably not going to win the game. They shouldn't have been in that situation. They have too much talent, and it's disappointing from the perspective of when you're in that position, and you're probably one of the 2 or 3 most talented teams in football. You think you're going to make them run, and you lose to a very limited quarterback. That's going to cost people their jobs, and I'm a little bit surprised that it looks like Dallas is going to keep the status quo.
Well, that should make the rest of the NFC East happy. I mean, everyone was mocking they wanted the Giants to keep Judge, so ha ha ha. I think the 49ers have a puncher's chance to go in to Green Bay, go into Lambeau, and beat Green Bay. I do, and I think Samuel's the X factor. And I know Jimmy G's a little banged up with the sprain or the shoulder, and now the finger. I mean, you're not going to outsling Rodgers, but I've watched enough of these teams over the years to know teams can go on the road and they can pull off an upset against Green Bay. I've seen it. It's rare, but, you run that football and you get him off his spot. I mean, anything could happen. I'm not going to sit there and say Green Bay's going to whack San Francisco. I'm not doing it because I thought the 49ers were going to be a dangerous team a month ago if they got in.
Yeah, they're such a unique team because Kyle Shanahan's such a great game planner. So, from that standpoint, he's going to draw up some things that give the Green Bay defense some problems. I think Deebo Samuel's the most interesting player in the NFL. He's so unique, his ability to beat you as a receiver. Essentially, he's a running back. He's tough to deal with. He is really, really tough to deal with. At the end of the day, the quarterback disparity is so great. I can't assume they're going to go in there and win the game. But they can win the game, and they can win the game just how I said, but it's a small margin of error. You got to run the football. You probably got to run for 200+.
Yep.
You got to keep the football away from Rodgers.
Yep.
And they're capable of doing it, but you can't have that goofy interception. If that happens against Rodgers, you're not winning that game. No. You might be able to beat the Cowboys, but you can't do that stuff that Jimmy G has a history of doing.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, listen, before I let you get out of here, the other night I caught the Seinfeld where George basically had to get fired, and he's having lunch at the diner, and the guys from the Mets say, we didn't say that. And he goes, you all paying for this lunch. I totally thought of you. They're like, we didn't say that either. All right, he is Johnny Mac, John McMullen, at JF McMullen. Give him a follow. Great follow on Twitter, NFL Eagles Insider, SI Now, Philly Voice, Jacob Media, Birds, 365 show with Jody Mack, of course, 6 ABC Post. To boot, football in the 20s right here every Tuesday on BYP. Johnny Mac, always appreciate you, pal. Enjoy the games this weekend.
All right, you too. Thanks, Rich.
All right, you got it. Our guy, John McMullen, appearing on the 1490 Sports Betting Radio Hotline. We'll get to some tweets on the other side. Sports Flash time.